There's CEO Table Talk. My name is JT O'Donnell. I'm the founder and host of this Work It Daily platform. So excited to have you here for this discussion. So today we're talking about tactical versus adaptive. We want to look at CEOs, how they're discerning the current issue versus the real challenge that they need to be solving in organizations. Prior to hopping on with my CEO coaches here today, we were talking about how difficult this really is. And I think you're going to get some incredible insights from them. So I don't want to waste any time. I want to bring them right up to the stage. Hello, my CEO coaches. How are you doing today?
Hey guys, how are you?
Great.
So good to have you here. So, first, I think it's important for us to define the two words. And Kirsten, if it's okay with you, I want to throw it your way and have you talk about the differences and really get into what this means.
Pleasure. Thank you, JT. The single biggest error I see in companies today is leaders solving tactical issues instead of taking the time to address adaptive challenges. Tactical issues are solving the faster, the cheaper, the better. The questions that consultants and experts help us solve. Whereas adaptive challenges are the underlying systemic root causes that often have us looking at ourselves. And this doesn't come easy. We need time, we need space, we need different perspectives to identify and address adaptive challenges. How do you know if you have an adaptive challenge? Adaptive challenges are often complex. They last over time, and they often present as ambiguous in nature. Frequently, they'll surprise you. But once we've uncovered them, they'll have you going, oh yeah, that's what's happening. Implementing the solutions to adaptive challenges, I've found force leaders and others to look at new ways of doing things. We often have to look inward, and we have to bring about adaptive solutions. Adaptive challenges mean adaptive leadership. That means we're going to be sharing responsibility, having self-reflection, and a community and an environment of continuous learning.
Amazing. So, of course, my immediate reaction to that, Kirsten, by the way, is tactical just sounds, like you said, so much faster and easier. Whereas adaptive, someone's going, oh, do I really have time for that? Do I really want to do that? But as you've pointed out, that's where a lot of people can get stuck. It can get into some hot water. Mark, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, my first thought is my stomach sunk when I heard Kirsten's definition and pointing, at ourselves. As a CEO, I was certainly part of the problem. And, we've talked previously, the group, and I don't care if you call it, tactical versus adaptive, symptoms versus disease, surface versus core. The problem, and Kirsten alluded to this, is many CEOs solve too many problems and often the wrong problem. And I think it's sort of funny, as your company grows, the number of problems increase, and the CEO needs to learn how not to solve the majority of the problems. The CEO needs to learn how to focus on the core root causes, the disease, not the symptoms. And because we're so good at solving problems, we become the problem. And so I implemented two concepts because I was a poster child for the problem when I ran my company. First, getting the problems off your desk. And second, only working on the root causes. And for getting the problems off your desk, and I'm not talking about the critical problems, emergencies, it's the day-to-day problems, the ones that we're good at solving. And they need to be pushed down to staff. We need to make the staff think. We need to make them sweat. We need to make them work. We need to tell them how much faith we have in their abilities and tell them that we want them to grow. And by doing this, you're not only training your staff, but you're giving them pride. And we all know prideful employees are long-term employees. And boy, do we need long-term employees nowadays. Mm-hmm. And the second focus is CEOs should be working on the root causes, the adaptive, the changes. And to help identify those, I use a really simple technique, the 5 why technique. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it. And it's when anyone presents a problem or a solution, you say, why? Tell me more. And you keep peeling the onion until you get to the core. And, a simple example, head of customer service says, hey, I want to hire a new customer service rep. And you say, why? And, the answer is simple. Calls are taking longer to answer and process. And you say, why? Well, quality is down. And well, why? Well, the gasket is leaking more often. Well, why? Well, we changed suppliers. Why? The buyer wanted to save more money. And now you're getting sort of to the core problem. It could be process, it could be training, it could be the wrong buyer, the wrong CFO, and it could be your problem, the wrong CEO, the hiring process. But by asking why, you peel the onion, and that's what the CEO's job is. How's that sound?
It sounds good. I'm also, as a CEO myself, cringing listening to this because it really does put it back on you when you say that. Even as simple a technique as the 5 whys and digging in deeper. How many people, raise your hand, that are listening today have probably not even asked the first why, let alone maybe going all the way to the 5th why, which is troublesome for sure. Mike, what do you think about this? You're all Vistage chairs, you're all coaching CEOs all the time. You've been in this situation before yourself. Thoughts?
I think especially for new business leaders or people that started a company, they had to solve the problems or take advantage of opportunities. So as Mark was saying, as they're growing the company, I'm thinking to myself, I know what happens as you start growing. You can't be that person every time, but because you've done it so long and you know how to do it and get things done quickly, sometimes they don't have the patience to try to teach, train, and develop their employees. So I think that's a very common challenge for people that have started a business and grown it and scaled it, is getting away from all that. So that's sort of the back thing I think about. But I always ask myself the question, what problem are we trying to solve? Because sometimes someone will state something, and then the person who ultimately has to make the final decision, in this case, we're describing the business owner, if they don't, whether it's the 5 whys or don't try to really understand the problem, they could be trying to provide solutions to the wrong thing. And I'll give you an example if that's okay. There was a real example I dealt with, and it was a very big customer, a very big opportunity, and the sales team was chasing it. It was worth several $1 million for the company. The customer wanted a particular solution. It was related to the case pack size of a product. And the sales team was pushing hard to get that done because it meant a lot of volume. It was a big opportunity. The operations people realized, oh my God, if we do this, it's going to totally disrupt operations, supply chain, and we're going to have a whole bunch of problems and complexities. Costs will go up, we'll lose money. And so they fought back. If you don't do what Mark was saying and ask the whys, or say what problem we actually solving, the person running the company in that particular case could easily just say, we're not doing that. It's going to cost all this money. And then boom, you could have a huge ripple effect at the client, because the client could just say, well, I guess they're not a partner. I'll go do my business somewhere else. The better solution is getting all the right people in the room that are stakeholders to the situation, including the customer. And what we did was we ended up getting a video of production. And if you looked at the production, everything coming down the line was in rows of 2, and we packed it in a box of 6. The customer wanted a package of 3, which you can just visually, I don't have the video to show you. You can imagine if they're coming down in 2s, trying to do a 3, it's going to be a problem. You could do it. They're a big customer, and you might just say, my God, I can't lose the volume. I want to keep it. And then you figure out the back and the unintended consequences. We got the customer on the phone, and they were very frustrated at this point in time. And we had to really, help them understand, we get it. We're trying to help you. We showed them the video and said, look, we could do the 3-pack. Here's what it's going to look like. And we stopped the machines. Someone manually got up there and started putting it all together and said, here's what our additional cost would be for us. And within 30 seconds, the customer goes, well, why would you do that? If they come across in 2s, why wouldn't you just do a 4-pack? And it's like, we just spend a month stressing everybody out, screaming at each other. And think about today in the hybrid environment we have, everyone's not in front of each other, not together. And then a 30-second video and a 2-minute conversation was like, oh, that makes so much sense. We could just do that. Or, another time the pallets were too wide for the door at the customer, and we spin our wheels, and someone goes, well, if you could just shrink the pallet, like, okay, well, that's the problem we're trying to solve, is a pallet doesn't fit in the door. Not that we don't want to, it's like, I think a lot of times, again, whether it's a 5 whys or just trying to what problem are we really solving here would be a tremendous help. But I think a lot of times business owners have done it for so long and they're so used to just making decisions. But the further you get away from the firing lines, the harder and harder it is to really know what's going on. So you got to take whatever strategy it is to make sure you're solving the right situation.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from all of you is you've got CEOs that are just so used to the problem solving, and they just almost in their mind think it's quicker for me to solve it now than to try to train someone or do everything that we need to do. Yet, as you're all pointing out, the further you get away from it, meaning the higher up you are, there is more complexity to it, and you don't have all the facts. And this is where that quick judgment or that quick, decision making and putting things in action can actually backfire based on what I'm hearing, which is amazing. So my question to all of you is, how do you make a stubborn CEO aware that they're doing this? I really want to hear from each of you. Like, what would your advice be? Because you have a lot of people listening today going, that's my CEO. That's my executive. They're not listening and they just keep doing this rapid fire, tactical solutions, and it's not helping. So does anybody want to go first? Kirsten, can I pick on you?
You always can pick on me. That's the question. So it is a cost benefit analysis when you need to think about a CEO interacting with a few people down the chain of command. Having just literally discussed this question yesterday on the battlefields in Gettysburg with a bunch of CEOs, we talked about literally the lives that were lost when commanders were jumping the chain of command and making decisions too far down the ranks and not allowing a purpose-driven leadership mentality to rule the day. And they were leading by a task-oriented mentality. So I'm going to give you directions about tasks, about how to do things, how to solve it, what to do. And that literally costs lives, right? Now, most of us, the CEOs we're dealing with, it's not about lives, but the difference between having a purpose-driven leadership and style and a task-driven leadership style is you're giving somebody a picture of the end state. This is what I want to achieve. And you have a realm of influence, a realm of decision-making power. Each of my managers, each of my leaders work within that to achieve this common goal that we have, right? That's a big difference in leadership style. It is a shift for folks, but there is a cost to doing it from a task-oriented standpoint. And to get somebody to realize that they need to see what the reward is in going the other direction, and then be open to the conversations, the coaching, the, in the moment, hey, do you think we could do it a different way? Or somebody just slapping them upside the head and saying, look, you're going to lose people by doing it this way, or losing people, but because you are doing it this way, right? We have to come in contact with the consequences of our actions. There's no other way to change our behavior.
Yeah, I love it. Mark, what about you?
Yeah, yet again, my stomach has turned based on this conversation. JT, you say, how does an employee get a CEO to stop solving all the problems and let the team do the work? I don't know if you can push a CEO to that. I think that for me, I was driven to build a large company. And when I joined Vistage, I had a small company. And there wasn't a single person who said, oh, yes, the way to grow your company is to solve all the problems. It's just not the way it's done. And so I was, in a sense, predestined for it. And I think that the employees and CEOs, they need to look at their company and look at themselves and see who are they and what do they want? Because there's no way you can build a large company if you choose to remain tactical all of the time. And one of the most terrifying meetings I had with my company was when I had added a product line and it was causing problems in the company, as you would expect, new ones do. And one of my employees said, why do we have to change? And I had just enough courage to say, because that's what we do here. And for everybody in the room, if you don't want to be with a company that changes, you need to leave. And for people who want change, they're attracted to the company. And so I think, how do you change the CEO? I think you uncover who they really are and then you let the company be what it should be.
Interesting. Very interesting. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm like Mark. I get sick thinking about these, having lived through a bunch of these myself. But a couple things. One is I've worked for people that no matter how much you try to coach and help them and see the big picture, they're just not going to change. And that's reality. I mean, I think we're kidding ourselves. I think we can change everybody by some process or some questions we're going to ask. But one of the things you can do is if you can just take a look at who are stakeholders in the decision process that have a similar mindset that they want to solve to get to the right answer, and start to work with them on it so that you have a unified front to it. So not everybody in the process. Sometimes operations will be, or finance can always be the never say yes group, whoever those people are. But if you can find, if it's sales, marketing, operations, finance, whoever the right people are, and you can look around and say, okay, who are the people? What coalition can I build internally? Call them culture carriers, wherever they are, that say, look, we don't want the CEO to have this thing blow up on him. The company can't afford it. What about the four of us sort of uniting and trying to figure out the best way to present this in a way that'll make more sense? The CEO won't feel like people were tripping on them, but they'll be able to present a solution that the CEO will understand that's right for the business. So I would say just trying to find a coalition of people within the stakeholder community, whether it's a customer internally, that can present the solution in such a way that the CEO go, okay, gotcha, I didn't really realize that, or wow, that's a really good point, I wasn't thinking of it that way, might be one way to get at this, because there are generally those people in an organization, and they're not always the highest title people, but they're influential in the company and they're trusted. So when they bring those kind of solutions to the table as a group, it can sometimes diffuse the tension internally and also make the CEO have an intelligent way to think about the situation to make sure the decision is made that's the right one for the company. That has worked, I would say.
Fascinating. So folks, today we're talking about tactical versus adaptive and how CEOs really need to, Mark, you mentioned it might be symptom versus, what was the way to call it?
Disease.
Symptom versus disease. I really like that. And so folks, all three of my executives here today are CEO coaches. They are Vistage chairs. So they're coaching CEOs on this stuff every single day. If you have questions for them, I would love for you to put it in the chat right now. But more importantly, take a moment right now, jot down their names. Make sure you go find them on LinkedIn or follow them. They're dropping really insightful information on LinkedIn. And you also, if you're brave enough, and I hope you are, you can send them a custom connection request and ask them to connect with you. Just make sure you told them that you saw them here on CEO Table Talk, okay? So I do have a question, a couple of really good ones from Michael here, but I want to jump to this one. Michael is asking us, can being consistently adapted as a CEO lead to untrust in the leadership? So can there be too much of a good thing, I guess is my question. Anybody want to take a stab at that? Maybe we'll go reverse order. Mike, can I throw that on you?
Yeah, I think the thing that's hard in these, there's so many nuances that go on depending on the company and the situation. So there's no one size fits all. So I think if I sense where Michael's going and I'm not talking to him, yeah, you have to be careful that you don't go too much one way or the other way, because there are going to be times, and I would use the analogy that if an employee or a situation where the company is going to go off a cliff, someone just needs to jump in, the CEO, whatever, and just make a decision. And it just may be disruptive in the short term. But as the business owner, you know that, my God, we can't do that. And I just got to jump. And otherwise, we're going to go off that cliff. And you don't have time to be adaptive. So I think you got to be careful here. We're not going one way or the other. So I think it's a good question. And I think you have to be very careful. The trust piece of it, I don't know. I'd be curious what Michael's really getting at there in terms of that part of it, because I'm not sure I understand where the trust would fall off here, but I'd love to learn more on that.
Yeah, I almost wonder if, we were talking before the start, see those companies where they put a new executive in and then that person gets too tactical and damages the business. So what do? They go put another new person in, and that person goes in a whole different direction. And, there's fatigue to that, right? And so I can see where if it was being seen as quote unquote adaptive, but there was too much change going on, people are just going to give up and figure, we're never going to get there. We're not letting, we're not settling, if you will. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, my example of my company, some of the employees complaining when we started a new product line, and like what Michael, his question is, if I had changed my mind too quickly, it would have showed a lack of courage. You go between deciding how to run your business to running your business. And you need to, when you make your decision, you need to have enough courage to let it ride for a while. A whole bunch of people helped make the decision. Have the faith that you have the right team, you made the right decision, and go with it. So yeah, I tend to say if you consistently adaptively change, you're going to build a little bit of mistrust in management.
One thing, sorry, if JT, Mark kind of triggered something on that. There are times when decisions are getting made that you as the business owner, CEO, may not think is the right one, but they're good learning opportunities. So you don't change, you don't adapt, back to Michael's distrust here, and you let the team make the mistake. And then you do a debrief process, and the team themselves will adapt. So it becomes adaptive in a different way, but the team starts to adapt and realize, yeah, that probably wasn't the best way to do it. And as long as you as the business leader don't suddenly chastise people because they made a mistake and you let them learn, you might find that the adaptability of the organization happens underneath, and the trust gets actually built. So it goes the other way, the versus what Michael's asking, it goes the other way because they feel like they're empowered to make those kinds of decisions at a level that still helps the business grow. So I just rethinking after Mark was speaking. So sorry, Kirsten, just wanted to thought on that.
Great thoughts. Kirsten, what do you think?
If we're solving truly adaptive issues, we're not going to be changing so quickly and so often that we're going to be eroding trust from our employees. Change for change's sake is never good. If we're taking the time and we have a shared responsibility across the leadership team and we're doing self-reflection, then we're continuously learning from the 5 whys or whatever our strategy is to uncover these root causes of whatever issue we're trying to solve for. And that takes time. So just by nature of the issue, if it truly is adaptive, it's going to be a slower process to identify and to solve for. So I think what we might be doing here is just confusing change with adapting to conditions or just making change for change's sake. Solving adaptive problems, I think, takes a little bit longer. And if we're doing it very systematically and truly getting to that bottom root cause, it's not going to be happening every week. Research does show, to Michael's question, research shows the biggest detractor to employee engagement and productivity is changing expectations, changing project parameters, right? Those changing conditions and expectations. That is a huge productivity killer. And so as leaders, we really do want to avoid that.
I really love that, because I think he's pointing out that we could claim that we're being adaptive when in reality we're being tactical, right? If it's going that fast, there's a warning sign. Mike?
No, it's just interesting. The employees, ironically, are the ones that know what needs to be changed or made better in a lot of cases. It's funny. We sit here and think but if you just would let the employees, a lot of times they're doing the work every day. They're living it. They're experiencing it. Yeah, sometimes they don't know exactly how to go about it, or they don't have the resources, they don't have the money or whatever. But more often than not, you get down in the trenches, they're the ones that know what's going on. They're
the closest.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. When I started Vistage, after I'd run the company for a while, and I started really learning how to be a leader, I had to learn how to trust the staff to solve the problem. And then what both Kirsten and Mike have said is you get to a certain point where you have to trust the staff to come into your office, close the door, and sit down and say something. Mark, you're doing it wrong. Here's what's going on. And it's such an interesting dynamic that a growing CEO has to go through to trust the employees to know better at times about that.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. I think if your employees are always yesing you to death, there's definitely a concern there. And, that point that you're all making brings up the follow-up question that Michael has. And I think this is one example. What is the inflection point when you feel it's time to change your decision-making strategy, right? So when you think about, I guess the way I interpret what he's asking is, what are some signs that maybe it's time for you to stop being tactical and start being adaptive. I think it could help us if we share those. One of them being your employees are coming in and telling you, right? I think that's a pretty obvious one, but are there others that you've seen, other warning signs, I guess, that should tell a CEO, hey, you might need to pull it back here? Thoughts?
I just had a conversation with a CEO who did a anonymous employee survey where all they could tell is aggregation of departments. And it turned out that one department had incredible dissatisfaction. And the CEO, there's a lot of noise that the CEO is experiencing on a daily basis. And it wasn't until that noise was aggregated by a survey that the CEO realized that they had a department problem, they had a head of a department problem, and they either had to train or rehire. So what is the inflection point? I think it's when you understand the noise better.
Yeah, that's a great point. Kirsten, what do you think?
I think if we're comparing the differences between tactical and adaptive, or root causes and symptoms, that inflection point is going to tell you that you're there when you are continually solving and trying to solve, and then it pops up. So I feel like whack-a-mole starts to show up, right? Say you have employees leaving at 60 days. We're like, well, we're not selecting the right people. Well, now they're leaving at 90 days. Okay, well, now it's an onboarding issue. Well, now they're leaving at 180 days. Okay, well, where's the problem now, right? We're chasing our tails, right? And we haven't taken the time to figure out, oh, so the culture that we're advertising and selecting is based upon this set of information. But when the people walk in, they find this culture. Oh, that's a much bigger problem to solve for, right? It wasn't selection. We didn't need a new recruiter. It wasn't the onboarding. I didn't need to get this whole new software, right? So we just keep playing whack-a-mole because the problem isn't really solved because it was adaptive, but we solved it as if it was tactical, and it's just popping up somewhere else. To me, that's one of the biggest indicators.
Oh, the whack-a-mole visual is fantastic. Literally, you just pointed out something I've been experiencing in my own business as you were saying that. And I was like, oh, as you were saying it. Mike, what do you think?
Another one is if you're talking about an owner who's got a leadership team and you go to your weekly or bi-weekly meetings, wherever they are, and you're noticing that people are just waiting for you to say whatever you're going to say. So you get in the meeting and people aren't really chatting very much when you walk in, or just the vibe. I think you just got to pay attention to that vibe. It's subtle, but you'll start to see people like, you know what, I don't care how many times I try to tell him or her what to do, or my recommendations don't get listened to. And you see get this complacency, almost this compliancy to the leadership team, because they're just like, okay, it doesn't matter. We'll let this person make all the decisions. And if you're noticing that, and then you as the leader are also noticing that you're tired and frustrated, you have to make all the decisions, I think those two little things are signals that, okay, something's amiss here. And that would be just a subtle one. I think you can pick that up pretty quickly if you're paying attention. Just subtle things like that.
I love it. This was an incredible session. You gave me so much to process, to think about, I'll be honest. Folks, I want to remind you, we are talking to 3 incredible CEO coaches. They are all Vistage chairs. You can find them here on LinkedIn. Jot their names down right now. Go over and follow them. Definitely send them a connection request and tell them you saw them here on CEO Table Talk. They're here every single month diving into these incredible discussions. And I always leave at the end of these feeling so much more knowledgeable. I feel guilty. I feel like I get to benefit as much. So I just want to close by giving each of you the floor to just kind of summarize and give people the main takeaway. So Kirsten, I'll start with you, just like we began. Oh, we can't hear you.
You're on.
There we go.
My first time mistake. Okay. Always take yourself off mute. No, that's not hard ending.
Sometimes you need to be muted, actually, and let the people talk. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. Yes, talk less as a CEO. Okay, that's not it for today. That's good news for other days.
Yeah.
Don't solve the first problem that walks in your door.
Yeah.
Say, ask 5 whys. Say, tell me more. Show me what makes you think that that is the main issue. Walk me through how you got there. Find something that sounds like you, that you can remember, that you can use multiple times, and get more information. Don't solve the first problem that walks in your door.
Love it. Mark, what about you?
Yeah, my stomach turned 2 or 3 times today, and that is because there is the science of business and the art of business. And the art of business is infinitely difficult and exciting. And even though my stomach turns, I would never, ever want to leave this world of learning leadership. And yeah, I'm here forever on that one.
Love it. And Mike, what about you?
I think the old saying, trust your instincts, applies to this dialogue we're having today. And by that, I mean, more often than not, based on my experience in running businesses and then also doing the Vistage work that I do, is almost every single person knows that internally they're the ones maybe causing the challenges, or they're acting very tactical. And so it's about being internal more than external. So pay attention internally is what I would say, as you're thinking about how you can get better at running your company and being this adaptable leader. But it really starts internally, not externally.
Love it. Thank you so much, CEO coaches. Another incredible CEO Table Talk on the books. Remember to come back and see us next month, folks. And if you want to know about when the latest Table Talks are, be sure to go over to workitdaily.com, sign up for our daily newsletter. We post all of our free events in there so that you can make sure you RSVP. Until next time, remember what we always say: if you want to win, you got to work it daily. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, JT. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.